2022 is nearly upon us, and to usher in the new year, the soccer fixture gods have concocted a Premier League top four showdown that sees inform Arsenal taking on even more inform Manchester City, while Chelsea and Liverpool duke it out in a Stamford Bridge six-pointer. And after a seasonal siesta, LaLiga returns to action with two Madrid derbies and another must-win game for Xavi's Barcelona. Can they do it? Nobody knows. And sadly, as has become customary these days, COVID remains a major talking point. I'm Jimmy Conrad. I'll be ringing in all the New Year fixtures alongside Heath Pierce and Jonathan Johnson. The Que Golazo weekend preview begins right now. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you leave us a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell while you're at it so you do not miss any of these amazing episodes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, do us a favor and leave Que Golazo a rating and review it. It only takes a few seconds, and it helps us to continue to make free episodes just like this. All right, first and foremost, Hollywood Heath Pierce, I'm coming to you first. What are your New Year's resolutions for 2022?
Oh man, I think I got him. I wanted a lot more football in the new year, and because of all these postponements, I'm going to get a lot more football in the new year. There's plenty of it, but outside of that, just that health and wellness for everybody. It's a crazy time, so that's the thing that's top of mind right now.
All right, you should run for mayor. That was a very political answer.
But it's the reality. I don't have a better way to put it. Maybe JJ can say it better, but man, the world is like crazy, And on top of COVID, I got a message from a friend in Colorado that perhaps she lost her house to a fire yesterday. I mean, everything is absolutely insane. So I'm literally mean this when I say health and wellness for everyone, Jimmy.
All right. I appreciate that, Heath. I'll back off. JJ, how about you? Any New Year's resolutions for 2022?
Well, I'll start off being a little boring and echo Heath's thoughts. I do hope that 2022 brings, plenty of prosperity for everyone, and fingers crossed that, we can have fans back in the stadium as soon as possible. We're going to see matches across Europe and, all over the world really hit by restrictions on the amount of spectators that can attend, in the very short term, but fingers crossed they don't last as long as we've seen in the past. But other than that, I guess I'd be quite happy to spend a bit more time with you guys, to be honest.
Oh, wow. What a sweetheart.
You talk about a politician. I mean, jeez Louise. This guy just won my heart and my wallet.
He is the mayor of my heart right now. Way to go, JJ. My New Year's resolution is to be as confident and as transparent as Romelu Lukaku was just with now his interview with Sky Sports Italia with regard to his situation at Chelsea and how he left Inter Milan. JJ, I'm going to come back to you about this because I find it interesting that they waited to hold this interview for 3 weeks and then decided to release that. Do you think it's because there was some pressure from the player to not let it go out there before he started scoring goals again for the club? Or tell me about this, and then we can kind of get into his thoughts with Heath.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting possibility. Of course, it was predicted, it was written in the stars that Lukaku would get back to goal scoring form against Villa. But I think as well, any player of Lukaku's caliber is going to be frustrated, get a bit antsy as soon as he spends a little bit of time out of the team. Sort of adding to, I guess, the political context at Chelsea. You will never have a Thomas Tuchel reign in charge of any team where there is not somebody who's rubbed up the wrong way at some point. Quite often it's the hierarchy. Sometimes it's a star player who has their nose put out of place. But credit to Lukaku for coming out, and just being honest about it. Now when you look back at the quotes in full, you can see that, this was perhaps taken sort of the best part of a month ago. But, also at the same time, I think it's refreshing to have a player who's, prepared to wear his heart on his sleeve like that. And, not only to show how he's sort of feeling when he's sort of in and around the pitch, but, also to be able to be confident enough to go in front of the camera and explain himself as eloquently as Lukaku did. So I can understand where some of that frustration comes from, but I also think that some of it is maybe being blown a little bit out of proportion.
Okay,
and Heath, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, speaking from a player's perspective, and when we get asked these questions a lot, you can feel when a journalist would lean in a little bit more, hoping that you'd give him a little bit more insight than the basic cliches. No, everything's great. I'm working hard, whatever. And Lukaku felt incredibly comfortable, or at least it looked like it in this interview, and obviously wanted to express how he was feeling about Inter fans because it seemed like he didn't end the way that he wanted. And maybe in that that moment of vulnerability as he tries to be as heartfelt as he can with Inter, he kind of just, in the same kind of note, he voices frustration with what was happening with Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel in particular, and that it wasn't a system for him, and he doesn't know really where he fits. I'm paraphrasing here, and he needs to talk to the gaffer, as it was, to get on the same page about how he can be best utilized. It seems like, given what Tuchel said in response, and we'll get to his immediate quotes, but he was a bit surprised that this was out there in the public and Romelu was feeling this way when his attitude of practice demonstrates otherwise. What do you think about these comments from Lukaku?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you said it well. It's in a moment of vulnerability. You try to be honest. Jimmy, you and I both, I think the reason we got into media was the fact that most of our career, we tried to give a better answer than a canned response that nothing matters. Try to give, even almost feeding our egos to give more than just the response of, the NFL quarterback type of response that you get, which is team first and all of this. I think that moment of honesty is needed in the game. Obviously, I think contextually, timing is everything with these comments. And sometimes you have a casual conversation with somebody and you think that it's not necessarily a safe space. I'm not saying it was taken out of context or taken in a safe space and it wasn't anymore. But those types of things happen. And I actually appreciate that type of honesty. The surprise thought for me, though, is that he's going to continue to be a starter when they need him. And that's what I think is important for all this, is that it doesn't just become even bigger when now he's been benched and now they got to figure out this whole thing. And quite frankly, when I look at this team and I think about the system that they play, I look at it and I go, what was missing was Romelu Lukaku to this team. Like, when he stepped in, I didn't see any more problems within this team. Obviously, they're leaking goals and all those types of things in a different way now. But when I looked at the attack and all the rotation last year, whether it was with Lampard or with Tuchel, he was the answer to those problems. And so for him not to have the joy in that, it feels very anti-Chelsea. It feels a little bit more like he was trying to make good on Inter Milan and those fans. And if I'm a Chelsea fan, I'm looking past this. I'm kind of seeing how his approach is. If he's going around the field and he's throwing his hands up in the air and he's all pissed off and he's got a bad attitude, that's something different. But I haven't seen any of that. And he just played a few days ago. And so it seems out of context, the moment of vulnerability where he's off the pitch and those types of things. I wouldn't read too much into it. But I do think the timing of it, Tuchel's right in saying that, this just kind of I don't remember his exact quotes, but it sort of just stirs the pot when it doesn't need to at this time of year.
Yeah, he basically said, let's be honest, I don't like it because it brings noise we don't need. It's easy to take lines out of context. Of course, I don't like it and it's noise. So interesting. So let's talk about this game in particular. Chelsea have taken just 9 points from their last 18 available after drawing 1-1 with Brighton on Wednesday. Danny Welbeck doing what he does. Dat Welbs, that guy's doing what he does. Tuchel continues to lament Chelsea's injury and COVID problems, and things don't really seem like they're clicking in all ways on the field as they were earlier in the season, and definitely as compared to last season. They've only managed one clean sheet in their last 8 league games. And then Edouard Mendy leaves for AFCON, the Africa Cup of Nations, after this game. Now, Liverpool, though, conversely, were also dealt a pretty big hammer blow in the title race after losing 1-0 to Leicester, even though they had opportunities to win that game or at least muster a draw. They could be 12 points behind Man City by the time they face Chelsea on Sunday, albeit with a game in hand. But that might be too big of a gap to overcome, even at the halfway mark in the season. I don't know if I exactly agree with what I'm saying at that particular moment, because City could slip up, especially when they start to focus on the Champions League again back in February. JJ, what are your thoughts on this game, and how do you see it playing out?
Well, I think it's kind of an extension of the discussion that we've already had about Thomas Tuchel. And, for me, as somebody who's seen him up close, coaching PSG before he went to Chelsea, it doesn't at all surprise me to see Tuchel kind of searching, not necessarily for excuses, but some sort of justification for this blip in form, because we know Tuchel is a guy who really doesn't like to lose, doesn't like to drop points at all. Will have come into this season with a very specific idea of what he wanted to achieve with this team, and that would have been a sustained title challenge, with the possibility of perhaps pipping Manchester City or Liverpool, to the finish line. Now, yeah, I can understand that he's frustrated about the situation with COVID, with injuries and stuff like that. But, some of this, lamenting the situation in the press was ridiculous when you look at that bench and it's worth like a couple of £100 million. There are other coaches in the league who would be crying out for that sort of, conundrum, that sort of headache that he finds himself in. Of course, I can recognize that for the likes of Chelsea, for the likes of Liverpool, having to try and get through a moment like this in the season when they're already sort of at a disadvantage in the title race compared to Manchester City is frustrating. But every team is having to negotiate this at this moment in time, and it's an absolute lottery as to which game will be called off next, because there seems to be a couple every day at this moment in time. So, I think in many ways, this whole Lukaku thing, has come about sort of at the right time for Tuchel in many ways, because it gives him something else to distract from the fact that his team been a little bit flat on the pitch, especially without Lukaku. I think they're looking a bit better now, but I think, this recent period has exposed, perhaps a couple of questions that we could ask of the German, because, the honeymoon period for him lasted so long when he came in January, pretty much to the end of the season with the Champions League success, that people are only now starting to actually look at this Chelsea side, and compare them to the likes of Liverpool, to the likes of City, and see that there are still some gaps there.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, obviously, as you mentioned already, Jimmy, 1 clean sheet in their last 8 is a little bit alarming for me with Mendy on his way out. It feels like, obviously, a must win for both these teams, especially Liverpool, who are going to lose Mane and Salah to AFCON for a bit. But when I think about the managers and I think about all of this, the only argument that I really understand is switching to 5 substitutions. There's been an embrace of that around Europe. Everyone else is doing it. When I look at the team having to deal with these types of substitutions, it's not so much about the depth, because JJ's right. They have the riches of depth. Even when they lose multiple players, it's less than ideal that they don't have their best 11, but they're signing this depth over and over again and spending a lot of money to build and create depth that can go on to win a championship. Now, it's unlucky when your team tests positive. Obviously, this type of Omicron is running rampant within teams and much more easy to get, so to speak, but the only thing I see there being an argument is that 5 substitutions rule. Obviously, this time of year, it's difficult when you play 26th and 28th. I think that's unrealistic as well. But having a chance to have more substitutions, rotate your squad, even if you've got to go deeper into your bench to be able to manage minutes, I think is really, really important. And I can understand the frustrations there. Having said that, I don't know if these guys, if they were in Man City's shoes and they had a almost full roster, if they would be as open or is anti this fixture, because Man City is getting the most out of their players. They're even having the luxury of suspending Grealish and suspending Foden because they have the depth of the squad right now and they're getting the results that they are. So overall, I think this is a must-win more for Liverpool. They need to get these points if they want to stay in the race. I think it's problematic for Chelsea and the fact that they are now getting Lukaku back. They have the distractions. And I do believe, by the way, and Jimmy, I want your thought on this. When you start to leak this type of stuff into the locker room, when you start to talk about fatigue and fixtures and injuries, like how much of that, I think that weighs on the players. I think that's a heavy weight to bear on the players, and the players start to feel more tired, and they start to almost mentally psych themselves out when you have somebody that's constantly harping that this is too difficult, or we're tired, or we're injured. It just seems like everybody knows it's the year after year after year. This doesn't change. And obviously you've got COVID on top of that. You've got the 3 substitutions. But it just seems like once that goes into the locker room, if you're Chelsea who are looking for a better form or looking for improvement, that's not exactly the news that you want. And I know on the flip side that Jurgen Klopp's doing the same thing. But yeah, just want your thoughts on this. Yeah.
No. I think it does plant a seed in terms of the mentality of the team. And if your manager's out there going, hey, my guys are tired, and that's what you're reading, and that's everything that you're seeing and hearing, and I'm sure he's mentioning that in the locker room, like, hey, I know we have a lot of fixtures. I know we don't have a lot of subs. You start to kind of buy into that narrative as well. And unfortunately, when I look at these teams, Thiago Silva's out, Chilwell's out, Reece James is out. You have 3 first-choice defenders that are out for Chelsea right now. Kai Havertz is probably doubtful for this one. We might see Christian Pulisic as a right wing back to start, which would be mind-blowing. Never thought we'd ever see that happen.
I'm for it. Let's go. I'm for it. Better than him at a 9. Let's go.
That's fair. That's fair.
One thing I'll add on that is, if there's a coach who can reconvert an attacking player to play in that wing-back position, it's Tuchel. I've seen him do it with Moussa Diaby before at PSG, and it actually works very convincingly.
Well, from your lips to Christian Pulisic's ears, hopefully that happens. And on Liverpool's side, they got Origi's out, Minamino, Thiago, obviously Harvey Elliott, Andy Robertson's going to be out on the last game of his suspension for that red card. So they got a bunch of players that are out. And as you mentioned, with Mo Salah and Sadio Mane out, and Naby Keita's going to go to the AFCON as well. This is such a must-win, I think, for Liverpool's perspective. Chelsea, I think, can manage Mendy leaving, however you feel about Kepa. But yes, what I find interesting about this Tuchel and Klopp, and they both come out and said, the fact that 5 substitutions wasn't around, I didn't know they went back to 3. That's how unaware I was. I just assumed it was going to be adopted globally at this point because it made a lot of sense, especially during COVID. And the fact that they went back to 3 is quite surprising. So I understand where their gripes are coming from there. But in terms of the congested schedule, they knew where they were walking into. It's been the same every single year. Maybe Tuchel's new to it, right? Because this is his first foray since he joined with Chelsea last January. So he kind of missed out on this. But Klopp's been around, man. I don't know. They make so much money during this period that they're the only league that's going on and have these traditions with Boxing Day and League Cup and all this stuff. That's just part of being a part of the England system. And to complain about that now, I don't think that's going to change. But I could see their gripes maybe leading to 5 subs being opened up again. And I hope they consider that. Are your thoughts on that, JJ?
I mean, I think that, there is definitely an argument for that, but also at the same time, having 5 subs back available is a massive boost for the clubs who have substitute benches that are worth hundreds of millions. It works out better for them. For some of the other teams, scrapping for their lives at the bottom of the table, their best players are already on the pitch week in, week out, whenever they can get them, fit enough to play. So, they're going to be looking to, perhaps some of the youth teamers, there's less. I mean, not less of an incentive. There's just sort of less reward, for having more substitutes for some of those teams. But I do think that, in these circumstances, especially with this sudden outbreak of COVID, which, sort of had they waited a couple of months, the 5 substitutions rule would still be in place. I definitely think that it merits at least being brought back, sort of temporarily or perhaps provisionally until the end of the season when they can make a proper, fully informed decision about it.
All right, and then JJ, coming right back to you. What's your prediction for this game? Chelsea at home, Stamford Bridge against Liverpool.
I'm going to say that Liverpool sneak a 1-goal win. Tempted to say 1-0.
Wow. Okay. How about you, Heath?
I'm going 2-1 for Liverpool on this one. They need it more than Chelsea does just to stay in this fight. They're going to lose 2 of their main attackers for what could be a decent stretch. And who knows what the quarantine expectations are when they come back and all that stuff. So I'm saying 2-1 to Liverpool.
Okay, I'm going to go with you on that. Chelsea have lost 3 of their last 5 Premier League matches at home to Liverpool. I think that trend is going to continue in some capacity. And if you want Liverpool to win and both teams to score, it's plus 340. I think that's really, really good value. Something to keep in mind. All right, let's move on to another big game in this one. Arsenal versus Manchester City. Now, some news heading into this one. João Cancelo apparently is a doubt after he had a home invasion and some burglars came in. He called them 4 cowards, which they correctly are. And he tried to defend himself, got a cut over his eye. I think he got punched in the face, and that doesn't look good. They stole some jewelry while his family were at home, him and his family, which is scary to think that could still happen. The Gunners, though, let's get back to the game a little bit, have lost their last 9 Premier League meetings versus Manchester City, including 5-0 earlier in the season at the Etihad, though this is at the Emirates. So, JJ, or actually, you know what? I'm going to go to Heath because Heath is our resident Arsenal fan. Heath, do you feel like Arsenal have any chance in this one? Because they don't really look very good when they play against the big boys this season. They do great against mid-table teams and teams that are below that. But against the top 3, they've really struggled.
Yeah, I don't remember who we were talking about the other day in the weekend recap or the preview that somebody that needed it. May have been Aston Villa or somebody like that needed to start, or West Ham that needed to start taking down the big teams. The same for Arsenal. They really struggle against the big ones, but they're in a great run of form right now. 5 straight at home. 4 of those are clean sheets. They're scoring a lot of goals, multiple goals in their last games as well, but they are playing against Manchester City, which is difficult. The only upside that Arsenal have is that they had a week break in between games. They had a canceled game or a postponed game in the midweek. And so I think that plays a huge role, on that theme of being able to have fresher legs and be able to put out a team that's more fresh. And again, they're not really struggling in terms of the players that they have available versus unavailable. Obviously, Aubameyang's not available until he comes back from AFCON. Even then, we don't know when he's going to be around again. I think the team is okay with that. This is a motivated young squad that seems to be trusting in Arteta at the moment, and obviously missing only Tomiyasu, Suarez, Chambers, and Maitland-Niles. So I think they have a chance. If ever they're going to have a chance, it's now. You could see City continuing to rotate their squad. We saw Grealish and Foden come back into the team again. Not sure if either of those guys play, but it shows just the riches that Manchester City have. I do think City end up winning this one because if you're a Chelsea or a Liverpool fan, you're all wearing an Arsenal shirt this week and looking for Arsenal to try to slow down City. Because if they get this win and then you offset those points over the weekend, it's a long way to catch up for a City side that even if they do go through the trenches of players out with COVID, it's going to be really hard to catch. So while I like Arsenal's form and I think that form will continue, I just don't see them really breaking this City side.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the Aubameyang situation, actually, because I feel that there's now fewer dead weights in this Arsenal side, and they're much better off for that. The performances are following on the pitch. It's nice that they now have some clarity around that. It looks like it could even, perhaps, shine a light on Lacazette's future, now that he's taking on a sort of talismanic role as far as being in attack is concerned. It might also open up the possibility of him staying on, prolonging his career with Arsenal by a season or two. And I think that Arsenal getting rid of some of these poisonous characters is absolutely crucial to them rebuilding to be, something that can at least compare with the past. I mean, I don't think that there's much to be gained by being super nostalgic for the very height of the Wenger days, but also at the same time, Arsenal as an institution is much, much stronger than the sort of behavior that's being exhibited by the likes of Aubameyang in recent months. And I think that we're now seeing the benefits of some of those strong decisions made on the pitch, because the performances are much, much more convincing. And you see now that this is a squad that's really starting to buy into Arteta's, thinking and approach. It's a shame that Arsenal will be impacted by the fact that I think Arteta is still going to miss this game after he tested positive for COVID. But I actually fancy them for the draw here.
Wow. What? Wow. What am I even hearing? I know they're a different team, JJ. I understand that Arsenal are a different team than the team that
Thank you, JJ, by the way. Thank you, by the way. Don't listen to Jimmy.
This is a City team that has to know that they have an incredible opportunity to create a gap at the top of the table due to the faltering of Liverpool and Chelsea in recent fixtures. And they're going to benefit based on that result since they're playing against each other as well. If we get into the weeds a little bit, Fernandinho, who I think is Heath's age, has played 90 minutes twice in 3 days. And Rodri's not healthy yet. And I just don't know if they're going to risk Fernandinho again for another 90 minutes. So I don't expect him to start. And I think that's a place where Arsenal can take advantage of. Odegaard has been fantastic. And I think he can find some space in and around there if Gundogan is going to be the choice that they make, just like they did in the Champions League final. And Chelsea made good use of that possibility without Fernandinho or Rodri in the team. So look at that a little bit in terms of who starts in this game if you're looking to wager on it. I think City are the heavy favorites here. I mean, I've got this stat, and I know everybody's like, stats this, stats that. But Arsenal haven't scored in each of their last 4 home meetings with City. But that's crazy. But obviously, they've looked pretty good going forward as of late. And I feel like there has been a bit of a fresh air, or something's been changed since Aubameyang got reprimanded. He must be late a lot. Because at some point as a player, if you see some guy and he's your captain who continues to get a free pass, it just gets tiring. You're like, man, when is we getting held to a different standard? And this guy has something, he's got this get out of jail free card all the time. And then finally he gets his wrist slapped. He gets the captaincy.
Is that how your teammates felt about you, Jimmy?
I can't confirm or deny this.
No. Jimmy was one of those. Jimmy was one of those guys that was always way too early. That made everybody like, if you're on time, you're late, JJ.
the teacher's pet while you were the rock star.
Yeah, for sure. I had to finish my cigarette out front before I came inside.
So, and also producer Des correctly states that Pep Guardiola made no subs in the last game, which I find kind of in stark contrast to the griping we're hearing from Tuchel and Klopp about not having enough subs.
It's almost arrogance that he's doing it. Obviously, Fernandinho is literally 100 years old, same as me, probably feels the same as me. But the other thing, and to go back to JJ's point real quick, and I don't want to harp on it too much, but when he called the draw, I think there's something interesting about Emile Smith-Rowe coming off of the bench when you talk about the Aubameyang situation, and you have these young players now where Emile Smith-Rowe has been very, very good coming off the bench, but he's not getting the starts. But he's scoring when he comes off the bench. And to have a player like that young, that thinks he should be a starter, that has the confidence to be a starter, but coming off the bench with the confidence to continue to prove himself, I think that's a result of something that happens with Arteta, or building the respect with Arteta, or not having an Aubameyang around who, when he doesn't get his way, probably gets away with it and throws his hands in the air or storms out of the locker room and causes a scene and starts to get, the whole who's coming with me type of thing. And I think when you remove that toxicity, you're starting to see some of these players even play bit part roles to a high level.
Okay, so let's just talk this one part of the conversation. I can sense that both of you think Arsenal have a chance. I'm going to lean heavier on Man City to win this one. If, let's say hypothetically, Man City win this game and Chelsea and Liverpool draw, which is more than possible, that creates a gap at the top of the table, which if that happens, it would be 10 points over Chelsea, who would be in second. Do you think the league is effectively over at that point? JJ, I'll come to you first on this. you think City would give up a 10-point lead halfway through the season?
I do think it's effectively game over. I mean, obviously there is, the quality in Liverpool and Chelsea's squads to make up that ground. But the big question is whether City would drop that many points. And I don't think if it gets into double digits, that City will, concede that much ground. That's why I'm confident that this weekend the results will go the way that I've predicted already, because I think it will keep the title race just about alive enough for there to realistically be a bit of excitement coming into the new year.
And you, Heath, what do you say?
Yeah, if I was Guardiola, I'd be going into a bubble. I'd be like, peace out, families. We're holding this team. We're not getting COVID from anybody. We're going to lock ourselves up. We're going to run away. But even just looking at AFCON and the losses that Chelsea have and Liverpool are going to have, there's going to be another 3-point window out there that I think that Man City are going to be able to take away. And obviously, the City will lose a couple players as well. But for the most part, they're deep enough to be able to look at 11, 14, 15 points. And even if they drop back to 6, I still think they can make up that ground somewhere along the way in this next month or so in a congested fixture period and with teams that are less than full strength with COVID and then less than full strength because of AFCON.
Yeah, with me, I don't know if it's effectively over. I think maybe there will be some Champions League stuff, but to JJ's point, Chelsea going through what they're going through right now, and I don't know if Thomas Tuchel is a league manager per se. Maybe he's more of a cup guy. I don't know. I wanted to get into that conversation. We can save it for another time. We got plenty of time.
I mean, the other obvious question is if Chelsea lose this weekend, is he even going to be the coach much longer?
Yeah. Okay, wow. We just took it like 3 more steps.
And by the way,
that is
Jimmy,
crazy.
Tuchel's big argument on 5 subs is the fact that he's having to put more minutes on his players when the rest of Europe aren't, because they're able to use 5 subs and rotate their players more than he is. That's another one of his arguments, Jimmy. He is a cup guy, huh? He is.
He does sound like a cup guy in some way. So I don't know if he's got it in him. He's a cup guy.
Big cup guy.
Big cup guy. But I do think Man City are going to win this one. I just haven't decided if I think it's with a clean sheet because they are very good defensively or if they're going to give up a goal. I kind of like both teams to score -150. I think Arsenal are really in a good run of form. They've got a lot of belief, and I think they can get a result in this one. The draw is a big stretch, but I like where JJ's heart is. There's a lot of good value there, +390 if I'm not mistaken. But a match result in both teams to score, +180. If you want the match result in both teams to score with the draw, +450. If you want Arsenal to win both teams to score, +800. But I'll lean on the Man City +180. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with regard to that. Now, let's take a step now towards Africa Cup of Nations because it's the last hurrah for some players, as we already mentioned for Liverpool and Chelsea. Apparently, there's some issues with Watford and the Nigerian FA to keep Emmanuel Dennis, who has been an absolute stud for my fantasy team. Shout out to Emmanuel Dennis and what he's been doing for Watford this season. Now, Watford is allowing William Troost Ekong to leave, but are really trying to hold on to Emmanuel Dennis. And it makes sense to me. He's been their guy that's really been driving things up top and making them a threat offensively. And he's, I guess, wavering as to whether he even wants to go because he doesn't know if he's even going to start. And I find that interesting that you would turn down a chance to play in the Africa Cup of Nations to represent your country, whether you're going to start or not. That seems secondary. I mean, when your country calls, you got to show up and play. But I also understand that Watford's paying your bills, and so you got to take that into consideration. Where are you on this, JJ, with regard to Watford and this whole Emmanuel Dennis situation and just Africa Cup of Nations in particular?
I mean, it's complicated because there's so many sort of different things to factor in here. I mean, first of all, they both be playing for the same nation. Secondly, you've got the Aussie men situation, which suddenly opens up potentially a spot for Dennis if Nigeria are able to prime away from Watford. But also at the same time, if the decision to name Dennis in the squad wasn't communicated, by the sort of deadline to Watford, I also think that Watford do have a strong case there, and that potentially reflects sort of the uncertainty that's been going on with regards to Aussie men. Will he be fit enough because of his cheekbone injury? Now he's tested positive for COVID again, and he's going to be stuck in Italy until just before the tournament kicks off. It wouldn't surprise me to see there be one more late push, perhaps from Dennis himself. And I've also seen people observing on Twitter, about how, this also has the potential to really undermine Watford, because if you've suddenly got a player who is extremely unhappy and feels that he's been hard done by in being blocked from being part of his national team during a continental tournament like this, is he going to be as productive for the remainder of the season?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll obviously give you more info about the situation as it goes along. We're going to have an AFCON preview in the upcoming weeks, so everybody knows what's what for one of the biggest tournaments in the world that maybe doesn't get the respect and love that it deserves, but we are going to give it that respect and love. So, Heath, I'm going to turn it to you. Which Premier League club do you think will be the worst affected by their losses of players to Africa Cup of Nations?
I mean, in terms of volume and impact of the team, I think Crystal Palace have a long ways to go. Obviously, everybody seems to have a couple stars, including the big four. Beyond that, if I think about the state of the team and the needs that they have right now, I still think Liverpool are the most with Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane, and Naby Keita. I think that's a huge loss to the team. I don't think they necessarily have they don't have the depth of production needed to keep the team going, knowing that those two are the catalysts for their attack, for their press, for everything that I think they are going to suffer the most. Again, Man City have Riyad Mahrez out and United have a few, but overall, I think some of the smaller teams are going to have a big impact as well. But when I think about the title race, maybe that's where my focus is. I think Liverpool have the most to lose with their players stepping away.
Yeah, I think Liverpool are the obvious choice, and I'm curious to see how they're going to manage that, especially with a huge amount of injuries as well. I do want to mention Leicester because they're losing out on Iheanacho, who was excellent against Man City in particular in recent games, and Wilfred and Ndidi will both be gone. They've been named to the Nigeria squad. They're also going to lose Nampalys Mendy, who's going to be away with Senegal, and Daniel Amarte, who actually was very good against Liverpool, and I thought one of the man of the match. He's in Ghana's provisional squad. So those could be 4 big losses to a team that's already a bit decimated as well. And that could really hurt Brendan Rodgers' chance to try to get Leicester back into Europe, or at least trying to get into that Champions League spot that they always seem to lose on the last day anyway. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. But when we return, we're going to break down, a team you might have heard of before, Manchester United, as they face Wolves. We're going to talk about some other Premier League games of note, get into some of the postponements. There's obviously a lot of those. And then La Liga returns, and then of course JJ is going to give us all the insight on what's happening in France with some Coup de France games. It's going to be all popping off. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite Que Golazo podcast of the week. It's the weekend preview. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pierce and Jonathan Johnson, and we got some big games to break down outside of the ones we've already discussed. But before we get there, I have to let you know that Sunday we move to week 17 of the NFL on CBS, and the day's slate is highlighted by several games with playoff ramifications, including a huge matchup in Cincinnati when the Kansas City Chiefs battle the Bengals. And as always, we'll get you set for all the action with JB and the guys on the NFL Today crew at noon Eastern Sunday. The NFL is on CBS. All right, now let's talk about another big Premier League game. This one involves Cristiano Ronaldo and the Red Devils, Manchester United at home at Old Trafford versus Wolves, 7th versus 8th in the title. They had a draw versus Newcastle. We saw that Cristiano Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes didn't clap the fans. Gary Neville's out there calling them wine bags or whatever he's calling them. They get a win over Burnley, which was a big one. I thought McTominay in particular played very well with a goal and an assist. What are we thinking of Rangnick's impact so far, Heath Pierce? And how do you think this game is going to play out? Because it seems like he's still sticking with the 4-2-2-2.
I like the 4-2-2-2 personally, but when I think about the way that they played in their last match, it's not impressive. You know, when I think about the 3-1 win over Burnley, yeah, the scoreline shows something, but Manchester United still didn't look great for large parts of that. And again, I don't think those have been personnel issues that we had pre-Rangnick, or Rangnick. I think he's going to continue to build on this impact. I think the people, again, I think about the Lukaku context in the same way that I do this Ronaldo not clapping the fans type of thing, where it's like you clap the fans 37 games of the year, but the 38th time you get clapped back by the media for not doing it in a moment of anger or whatever. And so I think that's overblown as well. I think he's earned his trust with the fans by bringing them gazillions of dollars over the years for the club that allows them to have better players. And maybe they're not in the best state now. But when I think about this team, I think about Wolves, really, when I'm thinking about this matchup. Wolves haven't played since I think it was December 19th or something like that. It's been a few weeks. And, Jimmy, you know what it's like. When you get a break over a period where it's intense, you go, okay, this is nice. But when you haven't played in a while, you don't know what kind of form you're going to be in, right? You don't know the players you have, the fitness levels that you have. It's really hard to replicate a training match at home. And in fact, you don't even want to play necessarily a training match. You play maybe 20, 25 minutes of these inter-squad scrimmage type things. And so you don't know what type of team they're going to put out there. I don't expect this to be a very pretty match either. Neither of these teams play exactly beautiful, but it'll be a defensive game with obviously Wolves being an extremely defensive team. But overall, I think that Man United should be able to win this one, scoring the goals that they did against Burnley, albeit it probably won't be impressive. JJ, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this matchup.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I just feel pretty underwhelmed so far. I mean, I don't know if I was really expecting, Ranić to completely rip up the playbook and start again. But also at the same time, I mean, when you look back at United's results since he took over, 1-0 win against Palace, 1-0 against Norwich, 1-1 against Newcastle, 3-1 against Burnley. I mean, they scored as many goals against Burnley as they did in their other 3 matches. All feels a bit underwhelming to me. I mean, sure, okay, that's 3 wins out of 4. But, 2 of those are by goal, one of them against a very, very poor Norwich side. For me, it doesn't feel like, these are sort of the groundbreaking changes that we were led to expect would come with Ranić. I don't know if maybe he's hoping to sort of bring those into place when, there is some, sort of let up, after the hectic festive period. But also at the same time, I kind of feel like the question, the shadow of Ranić's future, whether or not he has a future beyond this season, is still sort of looming large at Old Trafford at this moment in time.
Okay. Now, I want to mention their favorable schedule, and I put favorable there because they're going to play against Aston Villa, just for you, JJ. But they got Wolves at home.
Three easy points for us.
Potentially. But United, at least in the league, have Wolves at home. They got Villa away, West Ham at home, Burnley away, Southampton at home.
Got us in the cup as well.
Leeds away, that's right, and Watford at home. I mean, these feel like results that they should be able to get quite a bit of points and maybe put some pressure on
Jimmy,
the top four.
Those first 3 don't seem that easy. When I look at Villa, when I look at West Ham, in theory, maybe in the current context of things, but those don't seem like, even Wolves, who are willing to scrap it out, they don't score goals, but they're not going to give up much. Still seems like they got to get through those 3 before they get a nice little run of games, Jimmy. I don't know. Sorry to interrupt you, but it doesn't seem like that favorable for the next week or so.
I put air quotes around favorable just to get a rise out of JJ. But what I think is interesting is that now they're entering into the January transfer window. There's been some talk around Manchester United. Ralf Rangnick says, I have all the players that I need. We're not looking to go get a player unless we felt like it was an upgrade, whether we were trying to level up and we feel like we've got everybody that we need. Do you think there's going to be any movement there? JJ, I'll come to you on this with regard to Manchester United. And do you think they need anybody, or do you just think it's kind of a reshifting of attitude and tactics?
Well, I think it depends on who is allowed to leave. I mean, it seems like Martial will go if the right opportunity comes in. It sounds like Sevilla might lead the chase for him at this moment in time. Tuanzebe potentially leaving Villa on loan and then being loaned back out to Napoli could be interesting. I don't think it would necessarily be the most helpful move from a Villa point of view, but I think for a player who I believe can develop into being a very good defender, I think he really needs to play wherever he is right now. So I think if that is a move that can potentially go ahead, then it's definitely something that could benefit United beyond this season. But I mean, outside of Martial, I don't really see there being too much activity at this moment in time. It could be a question of opportunity. January transfer window is very difficult to predict. Nobody knows when somebody's next going to get an injury or a really long suspension. And that could potentially bring some interested parties to the table. But for me, I think that the biggest name I expect to see on the move from United will be Martial. And I think it's a move that he needs, and I think the club, also needs to start cutting ties with him as well. I think a fresh start would suit all parties.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with regard to Martial and just his stop-start career at Manchester United. We'll save that for another podcast. Heath, how do you think this game's going to play out? What's your prediction?
What's weird is with regard to the January transfer window, I'm looking at Van de Beek also, and I'm looking at Lindelof, who both didn't play with Fernandes out, and it's kind of an alarming thing in terms of their will to leave. And that leads me to sort of just my prediction. I still think Man United are by far the favorites to win this one. I think they'll get a result. I think it'll be an underwhelming one where we'll be asking the same questions at this time next week or in our recap of Ranić's overall impact on the team. The same conversation we've been having about about Ole Gunnar for times where you see they're getting results, but you're never left feeling all that satisfied because it doesn't feel like it's grounded in something revolutionary or groundbreaking or even stable, so to speak. But I'm going to go with Manchester United 2-0 win in this one.
2-0. That's not a lot of respect for Wolves. What about you, JJ? Are you going to give any respect to Wolves, or is it just going to be?
I am. I agree with I agree with the 2 for United, but I'm going to go 2-1. And I do think it'll be really, really underwhelming. Potentially a jammy late penalty, shock horror.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. That leads into my bet because one of my favorite bets.
Ronaldo to score. Here he goes. Ronaldo score, Jimmy. Penalty and what else? What else are we throwing into this bet?
It's just Cristiano Ronaldo to score the first or last goal plus 138. The guy either likes to set the tone or be the hero at the end. He's always got a knack for that. So I like Jimmy, him to score the first or last goal.
Jimmy, real quick before you move on, they had the Dubai Sports Awards here the other day, and they had Ronaldo up on the side of the Burj Khalifa, giving him the congrats on all the goals that he scored. So just so you know, your bet is not that much of a revolutionary bet, thinking that he's going to score.
I'm not trying to.
I didn't check through all of the awards, but did Jorge Mendes get the Agent of the Century for the second year in a row?
I mean, it's for a century. He wins it for a century. He gets it for the next century. I have no idea.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he puts on the award show here. So,
all right. Well, just to talk about some other games, there's been some postponements. I'll start there. Southampton, Newcastle postponed. I'm a little disappointed as a Newcastle supporter because I felt like we actually played well against Man United, and now we can't carry on that momentum. But it does allow some of our top players to get healthy. I'm looking at you, Alon Maximin. Leicester versus Norwich has also been postponed. And then there's other games that are still being played, of course. And we'll see them up on the screen. Maybe pick one, each of you guys, and any notes that you have on it. Watford versus Tottenham, Crystal Palace versus West Ham, a nice London derby there. Brentford versus Aston Villa, Everton, Brighton, and Leeds versus Burnley. JJ, anything stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll be keeping an eye on what happens for Villa. It'd be nice to be back in action after, missing a couple of games recently. Gerrard's back as well. He was doing his press conference earlier today. And I think this is the kind of game that Villa need to win if they're to start bridging the gap with the other contenders in Europe, because Villa are one of those teams who, so far under Gerrard, we've been very impressive against the teams you kind of expect us to be competitive against. And then we've just missed out when we've come up against the big boys. And okay, I think, Chelsea's 3-1 win was, I wouldn't necessarily say flattering, but there were some naive mistakes that Villa got punished for. But it was a closer run game than the scoreline would have you believe. So I think if Villa were able to get a win away at Brentford, still a difficult place to go, despite the fact they're still finding their feet in the Premier League. This is one that I've got earmarked as 3 potentially important points if we can get them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a fantastic matchup. Obviously, Brentford, I was looking at it. They only lost 1 in their first 9, and then they've hit this really crazy dip in form and starting to bounce back. But obviously, Villa, the absentees for Brentford could be the difference. They have a number of players. I think 11 players out. Villa only missing Bailey Mings, and maybe Young is still out for that one. But my match for that is Palace West Ham. I think it's a great matchup. They're going to lose Edouard after this match. He's in peak form right now. They've only lost 1 game from 10 at home. And they need the 3 points in this one for losing a contributor like that. And West Ham obviously crushed Watford, who are trying to keep a hold of Dennis from leaving. And I can understand why he wants to stay there, knowing that Premier League money is better than the Championship money. And they've only got 2 wins away from home out of 8 so far this year. So I like the odds for Palace in this one. But overall, I think it'll be a decent matchup and a quality game.
Yeah, it should be a great weekend of games in the Premier League. I'm actually looking to see if Spurs can continue their fine form under Antonio Conte at Watford. That'll be interesting to see if Harry Kane in particular, who scored 3 in 3 straight games, can keep that up. All right, now let's move over to a league that took a little bit of a break, a siesta, as we said at the beginning of the show. La Liga is going to return. Very excited about that. Unfortunately, Real Madrid and Barcelona have been hit with some COVID outbreaks. So there's something to take into consideration. However, I want to give a shout out to La Liga because their rules for COVID outbreaks are a little bit more transparent than the Premier League. So when a team has fewer than 5 first-team players available, the game will be postponed. And I think that is very clear. Though I wonder how they define first-team players. Maybe that's
what I mean. You could have Chelsea has 196 first-team players. I mean,
yeah. there's a lot to unpack.
I'm assuming it's the license or like submitted for the season, I would guess, right? Which is there's got to be a max number. JJ, maybe you know this more than we do. Is there a number specifically with regard to teams? Like, is it how many they submit for the season of players? Is there a max number?
I don't know without looking what the rule would be in La Liga, but I know in France that you have the opportunity to register a squad of 30 players. And if you dip below 11 available, you can then you can ask for a match to be postponed. In fact, there's an interesting case going on at the moment where Angers, who are already out of the Coupe de France, have asked in advance that their Ligue 1 clash with Saint-Etienne be postponed because they've got 19 positive cases within those 30 players and multiple staff members positive as well. So I'd imagine that La Liga probably works on a similar setting, but like you guys said, it really depends on the strength of potentially the academy. Whereas Barça at this moment in time are looking to bring through so many young players from La Masia, that they can potentially sort of survive the losing that many sort of first team players, depending on whether you actually count them or consider them as a first teamer in terms of the contribution they make.
Well, let's talk about the big three in Spain then, because we'll take Mallorca versus Barcelona going first. Xavi has only 9 first-team players available. Ousmane Dembele, Umtiti, Gabi, and Jordi Alba all have to isolate. They got a tough test going to take on Mallorca. They're the favorites, the slight favorites in this one to get the result. Ferran Torres, unfortunately, their big new signing, which I still marvel at the fact that they can sign somebody for $60 million when they don't have any money, and they just decided to say, hey, you know what, we're going to put $1 billion renovation into the Camp Nou as well. As crazy. But Ferran Torres can't be registered until January 3rd, meaning he misses out. So that's another player they can't rely on to get the results. How are you feeling about Barcelona in this one, Heath Pierce? I think they have a chance, obviously. They're the favorites to beat Mallorca, but Mallorca are pretty good at home.
Yeah, I still think Barcelona have been kind of hit or miss in terms of Xavi's impact so far. But as JJ mentioned, they're kind of in a building process that I don't think they're as stressed as perhaps others are. I still think this one probably gets postponed or kind of placed on the shelf until further notice, considering that there's a number of players. I think, if you go on to Who Scored and look at the list of Barcelona players that are out, it goes all the way down the list, and every player that you can think of.
I mean, surely Dembele and Umtiti, it's just a state of normality. They're barely ever available.
Yeah, it's crazy. And long let Umtiti, Dani Alves obviously can't play. Coutinho, Sergio Busquets, Sergio Roberto, Pedri, Ansu Fati, Memphis Depay, Martin Braithwaite. Obviously, Sergio Busquets, of all times to be suspended, is suspended now when they don't have enough players. If anything, seems like it was all part of a larger coup to get this game delayed. It's just being like, if we just lose one more player, we'll be able to have the math to be able to not play in this one. But I still think matching up against Mallorca, any team they put out, whether it's a bunch of 15-year-olds at Barcelona, are still going to match up well and should be able to at least kick out a draw during this tough time.
Yeah, and a draw might be good enough at the moment until they can kind of weather the storm and get everybody back. Now let's talk about Real Madrid. They're on top of the table, but they're missing some players as well. JJ, Camavinga's out, Courtois, Valverde, Vinicius, all testing positive. Vinicius, for me, maybe the most improved player that we've seen over the start of the season. He has been tremendous. But this is a Madrid derby, away to Getafe, never an easy place to go. I've seen the game there before. Difficult confines. The fans are definitely, in behind you, and it's not maybe the luxurious stadiums that Madrid players are used to playing in. Do you think Getafe have any chance? And if not, how big of a scoreline do you think Madrid's gonna put up here?
I mean, I think Real definitely still have enough to win this game, assuming that there aren't more positive cases and the game gets postponed. But I'd also argue to your point that Courtois is a fairly big miss as well. I've been impressed with the way that he's reestablished himself as one of the leading goalkeepers on the continent so far this season. I'll obviously be keeping an eye on Real, knowing that PSG are going to come up against them in a month or so's time in the Champions League. But when it comes to Getafe, I don't think that they're quite as difficult to come up against as they were under Bordalas. I think that Real ultimately still have enough quality, assuming that it's just those, sort of 4 main names missing out, at this moment in time. Vinicius, obviously, huge miss given the superb season he's having so far. But I think with or without him, Courtois, that Real will still be able to get things done. And in any case, I think Ancelotti will still be quite happy with the position that they find themselves in, even if they were, say, held to a draw.
Yeah, Ancelotti has been fantastic. Maybe my manager of the season so far. He's a player whisperer in so many different ways. I mean, the way he's elevated the performances, not only of the individuals, but the collective has been nothing short of impressive. All right, let's talk about the next Madrid team, the one that won La Liga last season that seemed to be stumbling despite having more talent than they've ever had. Atletico Madrid are taking on Rayo Vallecano. So Diego Simeone's apparently out with COVID. So maybe his presence on the sideline will be, I don't know, a welcome change. The fact that they don't have him yelling at him all the time. Koke's out, Griezmann's out, Hector Herrera's out. Joao Felix has also tested positive. Unfortunately, I think he's been in good form, and maybe because he wants to make a move and get out of there in January. Lots to unpack there. Heath Pierce, how are you feeling about Atleti getting a result and kind of starting off 2022 with a bang?
Yeah, Rayo Vallecano have 19 players out, so I'm not worried about Atleti being able to get if this one goes on. They have 19. It's crazy the number of players, and again, who knows come day of who's in or who's out. But by the way, JJ, I forgot to go on the in terms of managers missing. Arteta's out also for the weekend, and that's one that I think is going to have a big impact in that game for the Arsenal match. Anyways, we're not going to go back to that, but I forgot to point that out. It's one of the things that swayed me towards them not being able to get a result in that one. But yeah, Jimmy, I mean, you're the fan of Atletico, but it just seems like regardless of the times that they're going through, Rayo Vallecano are pretty depleted. And when you just put it all on the paper, if this game goes through, it just seems like should be a pretty comfortable win for Atletico.
I mean, it has to be because Atleti are currently in the worst run of their season. They've lost 4 straight games. They're 17 points behind Real Madrid. I mean, they can't win this game, to your point, when Rayo Vallecano is missing basically over half their team, or if not more than half their team, then I would be pretty disappointed that Atleti couldn't get more out of it.
It feels like quite an injustice, though, that this game, might go ahead with Rayo missing so many players. Because you look at the season that they're having, given their limited means compared to all the other teams, for them to be up there at this moment in the season is nothing short of incredible. I know, Iraola, you were talking, Jimmy, earlier about Ancelotti being your coach of the season. Sort of in terms of the lesser lights, perhaps people that, somebody that people aren't paying that much attention to just yet. Iraola's done a phenomenal job. He's up there along with Ancelotti, and Pellegrini is probably, one of the 3 best coaches so far in La Liga. So it is a real blow, for him to not have enough firepower to potentially be able to give Atleti a run here, because Atleti, looking at those players that they're missing, that would be the ideal time for a team like Rayo to actually give themselves a shout of European qualification. I mean, I don't expect to see them stay up there in the Champions League places as we see at the moment until the end of the season, but to see them sort of finishing in the top 6 given where they are at this moment in time it's not that far-fetched, really.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I should give Rayo a lot more credit than maybe I did with my comments, because they currently are in 4th. They're 1 spot ahead of Atleti. They're ahead of Barcelona. They're ahead of Real Sociedad, who everybody loved. Now, Atleti and Real Sociedad have both lost 4 straight league games. Barcelona are what Barcelona are this season. So fair play to Rayo and to the manager for getting the most out of those guys. Plus, they have the best jerseys, man, like the David Bowie kits. I love those. I can't get enough of those. So what I find interesting about all the opponents, and this is what I think makes it tricky about La Liga for everybody that pays attention to it. If Getafe, if Mallorca, if Rayo can get that first goal, I think it puts a lot of pressure on those other teams to try to dig it out, because they struggle at times, I think, to figure that out. Unless they got Karim Benzema on their team. That's like the one saving grace. Vinicius has been excellent too, but he'll be missing this one. So obviously 3 big games to keep an eye on. And as he said, we'll see if they even get played based on the number of COVID cases. Now, speaking of COVID, JJ, I'm going to come back to you because I know there's some stuff going on in France with the Coup de France and who's going to play and who's not. Are they going to allow the games? Are they changing the rules? Enlighten us with what's happening in France.
Yeah, so in France at the moment, there's a proposed reduction of the number of people that can be in a stadium to watch a match. It's dropped down to 5,000 at the moment. I think there's been a counter proposal, by the clubs to say that it should be more percentage of the stadium's capacity as opposed to a fixed sort of 5,000 number, especially for those clubs with bigger stadiums who could still, welcome fans and keep them responsibly distanced. But one of the the big risks for in France at the beginning of this new year is, Coupe de France matches being postponed, being able to find ways to rearrange those games, especially for the smaller clubs who borrow a bigger team's stadium in order to get the games played. So the French Football Federation have this rule in place where basically every time you name a squad in the French Cup, you need at least 7 players who have played in one of the 2 previous rounds of the Coupe de France. And because of the numbers of positive COVID cases going up by the day, they're thinking of temporarily lifting that in order to just get these matches played and avoid as many postponements as possible. I already mentioned that ridiculous situation at Angers. That would have been an absolute mess if they hadn't already been dumped out of the Coupe de France by little Lina Montlhéry, who came up against PSG a couple of seasons ago. So no, it's looking pretty interesting there. And then staying in France, just enlightening you guys and the listeners about what's going on. You've had 2 managerial casualties in the last 24 or so hours. Well, Niko Kovac hasn't yet been confirmed as being replaced by Monaco, but the expectation is that when his sacking or his departure from Monaco is confirmed, Philippe Clement of Club Brugge will be announced as his replacement. And City Football Group owned Troyes have also parted ways with Laurent Battles, the coach who was linked with Montpellier in the summer. So they'll be looking for a new manager. So interesting times in terms of the managerial merry-go-round in France.
Okay, now I'm going to throw this one to Heath, and then JJ, I want to come back to you. But Heath, Jesse Marsch is available. Do you think if there's a spot that opens up in France that he would, 1, consider it, and B, do you think that would be a good step for him in his career?
Yeah, I feel like Jesse Marsch thrives in scenarios where he sort of comes in as an underdog and the expectations are a little bit lower, where the team's maybe not performing well. I don't think, obviously, with Leipzig, he came in at the top, had a chance to build a season. I think he's good at getting that new manager bounce, motivating these players. I think he can be a very good people manager as well, where players feel welcome. Maybe you start to get the best out of some of the players who are underperforming under the current manager or don't feel like their situation is great at the moment. So I think if the right club opened up where he has the quality and the talent that could respond to that, I think he'd welcome a job. I don't think he's at the point in his career where he wants to have a full summer transfer window where he can build a squad. I think he's better in these scenarios where he's kind of taking the team that he's given and getting the most out of them.
Well,
all right, and then JJ, go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, it's my understanding that if Lyon were to decide to part company with Peter Bosz at some point in the next couple of weeks and months, it's not been a very easy time for him. There's a lot of turmoil going on at Lyon at the moment. Obviously, expectations sky high, one of the really big established clubs in France. My understanding is that Marsch would be one of the guys on Lyon's shortlist if they looked to replace Bosz mid-season. I don't believe that there's a decision sort of close to being made on the Dutchman's future just yet. Juninho Pernambucano stepping away from his role as director of football hasn't helped either. They got booted out of the Coupe de France a couple of days ago. I don't know if you guys saw that. Everyone must have seen the violent scenes during their Coupe de France clash with Paris FC. Turns out that both clubs eventually got kicked out of the Coupe de France because of that. So Nice get a bye into the next round. So things not particularly positive at Lyon at this moment in time. So Marsch would be one of a number of names on the shortlist if they do decide to change coach. My reservation for Jesse Marsch, if he was to come to France, is I don't know what his French is like, but I think for him to get his ideas across to the players, obviously communication is absolutely paramount. And I'm not sure how clear those lines of communication would be, say, at a club like Lyon, where you've got quite a cosmopolitan blend of players. And French people are just not necessarily the most receptive to someone who doesn't try communicating to them in French.
I will say, but he learned German. I'll give him that. Like, he seemed to really buy into that in Germany. And, there's been a few viral clips, JJ. You probably haven't seen them because you're not on as focused as we are on the U.S. side. But he learned German. He's able to speak German, kind of put himself into the trenches of, of embracing that. And I think French people, and maybe you feel differently, would respond to him at least attempting to immerse himself and embed himself. Obviously, then the delivery of that information is another whole nother thing in terms of comfort as well. But I do think he's somebody that would enjoy the challenge of having to immerse himself in that culture, although he's not going to come in probably with more than just the kind of a French for dummies and his backpack and a willingness to learn.
No, sure. I take that point, and I do think that there would be a strong case to be made if Lyon do decide to look for somebody new, because I think they'd need somebody who could realistically look at that squad and feel, well, I can do something with this group of players and not feel like they need new additions, more money to be spent, because Lyon at this moment in time, they've already had a point deduction in the league because of that whole bottle throwing incident with Dimitri Payet. I'm not going to say things can't get much worse for them, but, sort of the only way is up at this moment in time. And they need someone who could bring in the positivity that we've seen from Jesse Marsch, both, with Leipzig and also with Salzburg as well the last couple of years.
I don't know. It sounds like a dumpster fire over there with Lyon. I don't know if that's the right spot for Jesse Marsch to jump back in, but if he wants another job opportunity, maybe it's a good one to kind of resurrect a club that has a lot of potential. Well, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this show with me. As always, I love doing any of these podcasts with you, but especially the weekend preview. JJ, I'm going to come back to you. Any final thoughts? This is our last episode of 2021.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that's gone on this year, so much that we've documented here on Que Golazo. It's just been, an absolute blast to have been part of it with you guys. Heath, to have joined the team on a more regular basis. It's just been really, really enjoyable year, and I'm looking forward to 2022 bringing much more positivity.
Okay, and Heath, how about you? I know, as JJ just said, we really took a big step in our relationship here with you on Que Golazo and doing the U.S. Men's National Team Hour. What are your thoughts on 2021 and looking forward to 2022? Yeah,
I feel extremely fortunate to be able to do this with you guys on a regular basis. Obviously, I'm a few hours out from the fireworks here, so I'm way into the future from you guys. Not so much for JJ, but yeah, just that I appreciate everyone. I appreciate everyone that tunes in and watches this. It validates everything that we're doing, and I look forward to 2022 because it's a busy year next year. Can't wait for it to start.
Honestly, Heath, you should run for office. All right, thanks for watching and or listening, everybody. Follow the Que Golazo podcast on Twitter at Que Golazo Pod. Subscribe to the Que Golazo page on YouTube and hit that notification bell. That would be very much appreciated. And of course, subscribe to Que Golazo wherever you get your podcasts. Happy New Year, everyone. See you on Sunday in 2022 for our live YouTube weekend recap. We'll see you then. Later.